My mom ignored me for 7 years. At Christmas, I casually mentioned I sold my company. My brother mocked me, asking if I made enough to pay my rent. I looked him in the eye and said $500 million. His jaw dropped. My mother turned pale, and my sister-in-law choked on her wine. But before I tell you how I bought my family debt and evicted them from the house they thought they owned, I would love to know where you are watching from in the comments. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep who turned out to be the wolf. I gripped the steering wheel of the rented Toyota Corolla until my knuckles turned white. The GPS announced I had arrived in Buckhead, which is Atlanta's most prestigious neighborhood, but I did not need a machine to tell me where I was. I knew this driveway. I knew these manicured hedges. The last time I was here 7 years ago, I was being dragged out the front door by my mother holding nothing but a black trash bag filled with my clothes. She told me I was a disgrace for wanting to write code instead of finding a rich husband. Now I was back, not to beg for forgiveness, but to witness their downfall. I put the car in park, taking a deep breath to steady the nerves that were fighting against my resolve. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. No makeup, a simple gray sweater and jeans. I wanted them to see exactly what they expected to see: a failure. Before I could even unbuckle my seatbelt, the front door of the mansion swung open. It was not my mother. It was Ashley, my sister-in-law. She marched down the stone steps, her heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. She did not smile. She did not wave. She tapped on my window with a perfectly manicured nail. I rolled it down. "Hello to you too, Ashley," I said, forcing a polite tone. "Jasmine, you cannot park here," she said, not even bothering with a greeting. "Terrence is on his way back with the G-Wagon. We need the driveway clear for photos. You know how important his image is for his real estate brand." I looked at the empty street behind me. It was raining lightly. "You want me to park on the street in the rain?" I asked. Ashley sighed, rolling her eyes as if I were a slow child. "Please, Jasmine, just move it. We do not want the neighbors seeing a rental compact car in the driveway. It lowers the property value just looking at it. Park around the corner and walk back. And hurry up, Mom is already in a mood." She turned on her heel and walked back inside without waiting for a response. I sat there for a moment listening to the rain hit the roof. It lowers the property value. That was the welcome I got after 7 years. I reversed the car and parked a block away. As I walked back to the house in the drizzle, getting my hair wet, I reminded myself why I was here. They cared about image. They cared about money. Today, they were going to lose both. I pushed open the heavy oak front door and stepped into the foyer. The smell of cinnamon and expensive potpourri hit me instantly. It smelled like money. It smelled like a lie. My mother Viola was standing by the 12-foot Christmas tree adjusting a gold ornament. She looked impeccable in a silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. She heard the door close and turned around. She did not run to me. She did not smile. She scanned me from head to toe, her eyes lingering on my wet hair and my simple boots. "I see you decided to show up," she said, her voice cool and detached. "And you dress like that." "It is good to see you too, Mom," I said, standing my ground. "I told you we are having important guests tonight," she snapped, walking over to pick a piece of lint off my shoulder. "Pastor Jenkins is coming by for dessert. The Wilsons are coming. And you look like you just came from a shift at the grocery store." "I am comfortable," I said. "You are embarrassing," she corrected. "Well, since you are dressed for manual labor, you can make yourself useful. Go to the kitchen. Mrs. Higgins needs help with the catering trays. And Jasmine, please stay in the kitchen when the guests arrive. I do not want to have to explain your situation to people who actually have successful children." She pointed toward the kitchen door like I was a servant she had just hired. I felt the familiar sting of tears pricking my eyes, the old wound of never being good enough ripping open. But I swallowed the pain. I was not the scared 25-year-old girl anymore. I walked toward the kitchen, grabbing an apron from the hook. If she wanted to treat me like help, fine. I would serve them their last supper. I had barely tied the apron strings when the front door crashed against the wall. The silence of the house shattered instantly. I could hear heavy footsteps stomping on the hardwood floor, followed by the distinct, heavy jingle of car keys being thrown onto the marble entry table. It was a sound designed to be heard, a sound that screamed, "Look at me." Then came the voice. It was loud. It was performative. It was my brother Terrence. "I told them 2.5 million is the floor," I heard him shouting, presumably into his phone. "If they want the property in Buckhead, they need to pay Buckhead prices. Tell the investors I am not playing games today." He paused, as if listening to a response, but I knew better. I knew that tone. It was the same tone he used when he was rehearsing lines in the mirror. There was probably no one on the other end of the line. I stayed in the kitchen arranging the tray of deviled eggs my mother had ordered me to prepare, but there was no escaping him. The swinging door pushed open and Terrence strode in. He looked like a caricature of success. His suit was a shade of blue that was just a little too bright. His watch was the size of a hockey puck and flashed with fake diamonds under the kitchen lights. He brought a wave of expensive cologne with him that instantly overpowered the smell of the food. He stopped when he saw me. His eyes raked over my simple jeans and sweater, and a smirk curled the corner of his mouth. "Well, look who it is," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "The prodigal sister returns. I saw that little rental car parked down the street. Smart move hiding it. We do not want the neighbors thinking the property value is dropping." "It is good to see you too, Terrence," I said, keeping my attention on the food. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms over his chest to make sure I saw the Mercedes logo on his key fob, which he was still clutching. "So, are you still doing that little computer thing?" he asked. "What was it called again?" "Credit Builder." I placed the last egg on the tray before looking at him. "It is a financial literacy platform, Terrence," I said calmly. "And yes, I am still doing it." He let out a short, barking laugh. "Financial literacy," he mocked. "That is rich coming from someone who drives a Toyota. You know real money is in real estate, Jasmine. Brick and mortar. I just closed a deal this morning that is worth more than your entire life savings. You should let me teach you a thing or two. Maybe then you could afford a dress that does not look like it came from a discount bin." I bit my tongue. I wanted to tell him that my tax bill last year was higher than the value of the house he was standing in. I wanted to tell him that the G-Wagon in the driveway was a rental, and I knew his credit score was in the double digits, but I stayed silent. The reveal would be sweeter if I waited. Just then, the doorbell rang. "That must be the dry cleaning," Terrence said, pushing off the counter. "I had my lucky suit pressed for tonight. Important people coming, you know. Not that you would understand." He patted his pockets dramatically and then frowned. He looked at me, and then his eyes darted to my purse, which was sitting open on the kitchen island. "Shoot," he muttered. "I only have $100 bills on me. I cannot break 100 for a tip." Before I could stop him, he reached into my purse. His hand rummaged through my personal belongings with zero hesitation. He pulled out my wallet and flipped it open. "Hey," I said, stepping forward. "That is mine." "Relax, sis," he said, pulling out a $20 bill. "I am just borrowing a 20. You do not want me to look cheap in front of the delivery guy, do you? It reflects bad on the family." He did not ask, he just took it. He stuffed my money into his pocket and winked at me. "I will pay you back when I break a big bill," he said with a grin that said he absolutely never would. "Consider it a tax for breathing my air." He turned and walked out of the kitchen whistling as he went to pay for his rental suit with my money. I stood there staring at my open purse. He had stolen $20 from me because he wanted to look rich, but was actually broke. He had no idea that the black metal card sitting right behind that $20 bill had a limit higher than the GDP of a small country. I closed my wallet and smiled. "Keep the change, Terrence. You are going to need it." By 7:30, the house was vibrating with the hum of expensive chatter. The air grew heavy with the scent of heavy perfumes and the underlying tension of performance. My mother Viola was in her element. She stood by the marble fireplace holding court like a queen, with Terrence standing right beside her as the crown prince. She kept her hand resting on his forearm constantly, as if to physically anchor herself to his imaginary success. Pastor Jenkins was there, nodding solemnly, as Terence explained a property deal that I knew for a fact had fallen through 3 weeks ago. The Wilsons were there too, scanning the room with critical eyes, looking for dust or cracks in the facade. I moved through them like a ghost holding a silver tray of appetizers that I had spent the last hour arranging. I offered a crab cake to Mrs. Wilson, and she looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. "Oh, Jasmine, I did not see you there," she said, taking a napkin. "You are helping the catering staff tonight. That is so sweet of you to pitch in." "I am not helping the staff, Mrs. Wilson," I said, keeping my voice level. "I made these." Before she could respond, Viola swooped in. She laughed, a high tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. "Oh, you know Jasmine," Viola said, patting my cheek with a little too much force. "She loves to serve. She has always had a servant heart. Unlike Terence, who was born to lead." "Tell them about the new Skyline project, Terence." Terence puffed out his chest, adjusting his tie. "Well, you know, Mom, I cannot discuss the details of the contracts yet," he said, looking important. "Non-disclosure agreements and all that. But let us just say that Buckhead is about to get a major upgrade thanks to my firm." The guests cooed in admiration. They looked at him with awe. Then their eyes slid back to me, the woman in the jeans and sweater holding a tray of food. The contrast was exactly what my mother wanted: the successful son and the failure daughter. "So Jasmine," Mrs. Wilson asked, turning her attention back to me, "what are you doing with yourself these days? Are you still living in that little apartment downtown?" I opened my mouth to speak, but Viola cut me off. "She is still finding herself." Viola said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, as if discussing a terminal illness. "You know how this generation is. They drift. She is trying to figure out who she wants to be when she grows up. We just pray for her direction every night." Ashley drifted over, swirling her wine glass. She looked me up and down with a smirk. "We are praying for a husband too," Ashley added with a fake sigh. 32 is not exactly young anymore, Jasmine. The clock is ticking loud. I told Terence we should set her up with one of his interns, but I think she might be a little too set in her ways for a man to handle. It is a shame, really. Not everyone gets the fairy tale. I gripped the silver tray so hard my fingers cramped. They talked about me like I was not there, like I was a piece of furniture that had gone out of style. I wanted to throw the crab cakes on the floor. I wanted to scream that I had more employees than Terence had friends. Actually, I started to say I am doing really well. My work in the tech sector has been very rewarding. Mrs. Wilson looked interested. "Tech?" she asked. "I heard something about that. Is it true you are working with software? That sounds very complicated." I took a breath, ready to finally drop a hint of the truth. Ready to say that my software was currently being used by 3 million people. "Yes, actually, I founded a platform that helps people to—" "No, no, no," Viola interrupted, her voice sharp and loud, cutting through the conversation like a knife. "It is just a little computer hobby," Viola said, waving her hand dismissively in front of my face. "Nothing worth boring you with, Mrs. Wilson. Just games and internet things. Now, Terence, tell the pastor about the donation you are planning for the new church wing. I am sure that is much more interesting to everyone." The transition from the living room to the dining room was a parade of wealth I knew was built on credit. The table was set for a king with crystal glasses sparkling under the chandelier and a centerpiece of white roses that probably cost more than my first car. Everyone moved to their assigned seats, laughing and complimenting Viola on her taste. I stood back, waiting for the crowd to settle so I could find my place card. I circled the table once, then twice. I saw a seat for Ashley. I saw a seat for Pastor Jenkins. I saw a seat for every single person in that house, except for me. There were 12 chairs and 13 people. My stomach tightened, not with hunger, but with the familiar cold ache of rejection. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice low so I would not make a scene. "I think you forgot a chair." Viola stopped pouring water into the pastor glass. She looked at me, And then she looked at the table with a performance of confusion that deserved an Academy Award. "Oh dear." She sighed loud enough for the entire room to hear. "I must have miscounted the RSVP list. I thought you said you might be too busy to make it, Jasmine, so I gave your spot to Mrs. Wilson. We cannot squeeze another chair in now. It would ruin the symmetry of the table setting." She gestured vaguely toward the swinging door that led to the kitchen. "Just grab a plate and go eat at the small round table in the breakfast nook," she said breezily. "It is much quieter in there anyway. You know how loud Terrence gets when he starts talking business. You will be more comfortable back there." She turned her back on me before I could respond, dismissing me as easily as she would a servant. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. The guests kept their heads down, pretending to be fascinated by their napkins. They knew this was wrong. They knew it was cruel. But no one wanted to cross Viola in her own house. I did not argue. I did not beg for a seat at a table where I was not wanted. I picked up my plate, filled it with a small portion of turkey and greens, and walked through the swinging door. The kitchen was cold. The breakfast nook was not a nook at all, but a wobbly card table set up in the corner near the pantry where the staff usually took their breaks. I sat down on a hard metal stool. Through the door I could hear the clinking of silverware and the roar of laughter. I heard Terrence telling a joke and my mother laughing that high fake laugh she used to charm rich people. I ate my Christmas dinner in silence, staring at the stainless steel refrigerator. Then the door swung open. It was my father, Otis. He was holding an empty wine decanter. He stopped when he saw me. He froze in the middle of the kitchen. For a long moment, it was just the two of us. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised me, who used to read me bedtime stories before Mom told him to stop coddling me. I waited for him to say something. I waited for him to say, "This is ridiculous, come back out there." I waited for him to say, "I am sorry." He looked at my plate. He looked at my face. I saw the shame in his eyes. I saw the pity. But then I saw the fear. He was terrified of her. He was terrified of rocking the boat. He looked away from me, focusing his eyes on the wine rack. He grabbed a bottle of expensive red wine, opened it with trembling hands, and poured it into the decanter. He did not say a word. He turned around and walked back through the swinging door, leaving me alone again. That silence hurt more than anything my mother had ever said. Her cruelty was expected. His cowardice was a betrayal that cut down to the bone. When the laughter died down in the dining room, the herd migrated back to the plush velvet sofas of the living room for the main event. I waited a few minutes before following them, not wanting to be the shadow that darkened their doorway. I stood in the back near the bookshelf watching them. It was time for presents. This was not about love in my family. It was about the price tag. It was a competition to see who could display the most affection through currency. Terrence went first naturally. He strutted to the center of the room holding a large box wrapped in shimmering gold paper. "For the Queen of the Castle," he announced, bowing dramatically to Viola. My mother clapped her hands together like a giddy schoolgirl. She tore into the paper with none of the grace she pretended to have. When she pulled out the bag, she screamed. It was a Louis Vuitton tote. The monogram pattern was unmistakable. "Oh, Terrence," she wailed, clutching it to her chest. "It is magnificent. You spoil me, son. You truly spoil me. Look, everyone. Look what my successful boy bought me." She paraded it around the room, holding it up for Ashley and the Wilsons to admire. I watched from the corner. From 10 feet away, I could see the stitching was uneven near the handle. The leather looked too shiny under the recessed lighting. It was a counterfeit, probably bought from a trunk in a parking lot for $200. But Viola did not care. She only cared that it looked expensive enough to make her friends jealous. Then it was my turn. My stomach churned as I reached into my tote bag. I did not have a gold box. I pulled out a small rectangular package wrapped in simple silver paper. I walked over to her chair, feeling like an intruder in my own home. "Merry Christmas, Mom," I said softly, holding it out. She took it with 2 fingers, as if it might stain her new silk dress. She ripped the paper off carelessly and stared at it. It was a framed photo, a black and white picture of the two of us from when I was 5 years old. It was taken before she met my stepfather, before Terrence came along, before I became the disappointment. We were laughing in the photo. It was the last memory I had of her actually hugging me. She looked at it for 1 second. "That is nice," she said, her voice flat and bored. She did not smile. She did not tear up. She leaned down and set the frame face down on the floor next to her chair like it was a piece of trash she did not want to look at. "Anyone else want some eggnog?" she asked the room, completely dismissing my existence. I felt cold all over. I wanted to pick up the frame and run, but I froze. I watched Terrence smirk at me from across the room. He walked over and draped his arm heavily around my shoulders. His breath smelled like expensive scotch and cheap cologne. "Cute gift, sis," he whispered. "Real sentimental. But hey, since you are in a giving mood, there is something you can do for the family." He patted my shoulder with a heavy, condescending rhythm. "The party is winding down. Since you did not really contribute to the conversation, why do not you be a good little sister and help the staff clean up? Oh, and one more thing." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. He pressed it into my hand. "You forgot this." I looked down. It was not a napkin. It was the bill for the entire catering service. I stared at the crumpled paper in my hand. It was an invoice from Elegant Affairs Catering. The total at the bottom was circled in red ink: $8,500 for one dinner. For a dinner where I had been banished to the kitchen like a naughty child. For a dinner where I had served appetizers to people who looked right through me. I looked up at Terrence. He was grinning, that oily grin of his, leaning back with his hands in his pockets. "What is this?" I asked, my voice quiet. "It is the bill, Jasmine," he said slowly, as if explaining quantum physics to a toddler. "For the food, the service, the wine you did not drink. Why are you giving it to me?" "Well, you see, sis, I am a little liquid illiquid at the moment. All my cash is tied up in the Midtown project. Big things happening, you know. Millions on the line. I cannot just pull 8 grand out of thin air right now. But you, since you are living that simple life with no overhead, I figured you probably have some savings tucked away in a mattress somewhere." He shrugged. "Consider it your Christmas gift to the family. Since that little picture frame was, well, let us be honest, kind of cheap." I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. "You want me to pay $8,000 for a party you threw to show off?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "You want me to pay for the food I was not allowed to eat at the table?" Ashley chimed in from the sofa, swirling her wine glass. "Oh, do not be so dramatic, Jasmine. It is just money. You are always so tight with your cash. It is honestly kind of unbecoming. We have expenses you could not even imagine. Private school tuition, the lease on the G-Wagon, country club dues. You live in a shoebox apartment. What else do you have to spend money on?" Viola nodded in agreement from her throne. "Your sister-in-law is right, Jasmine. You have been mooching off this family emotional support for years. We let you come here. We let you be part of this beautiful evening. And now you are going to make a scene over a simple bill. You are so selfish. Just like your father used to be before I straightened him out." I looked at Otis. He was staring intently at his shoes, refusing to meet my eyes. "I do not have $8,000 in cash on me," I said, my hand tightening around the bill. Terrence laughed. "Well, of course you do not. I did not expect you to have real money. Use a credit card, unless your credit is shot." "Is that it? Did you max out your limit buying cat food?" He looked around the room, inviting the guests to join in his mockery. A few of them chuckled nervously. "Just pay it, Jasmine." Viola snapped, her patience wearing thin. "Stop embarrassing us. Your brother handles the millions. He handles the empire. You can handle one little bill. Or are you really that useless?" That was it. The final straw. The last insult I would ever swallow. "Fine," I said. My voice was ice. "I will pay it. I do not have cash on me." I stated clearly, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The room seemed to hold its breath for a second before Terrence let out a loud, incredulous snort. He slapped his knee as if I had just told the funniest joke of the century. "She does not have cash," he announced to the room, wiping a fake tear from his eye. Oh, that is rich. Literally, that is rich coming from you. What happened, Jasmine? Did you spend your last dollar on that rental car outside? Do you need me to spot you a 50 for gas so you can make it back to your little apartment? I know gas prices are high for people in your tax bracket. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a crumpled $50 bill, waving it in front of my face, like he was teasing a dog with a treat. Here, he said, his voice dripping with mock charity. Take it. I insist. I do not want my little sister stranded on the side of the road on Christmas. It would look bad for my brand. Ashley giggled from the sofa, sipping her wine. Take it, Jasmine, she urged. He is being generous. You know how hard it is to make ends meet when you do not have a real job. I looked around the room. The Wilsons were staring at their shoes. Pastor Jenkins was suddenly very interested in the bottom of his empty glass. The pity in their eyes was suffocating. They looked at me like I was a charity case, a broken bird that had fallen out of the nest. They felt sorry for Viola having such a disappointment for a daughter. The air in the room was thick with second-hand embarrassment. My mother stood there, arms crossed, shaking her head with a look of pure disgust. Honestly, Jasmine, she hissed. If you cannot pay, just say so. Do not stand there and humiliate yourself further. We will put it on Terrence's tab, and you can pay us back in installments. $20 a month should be manageable for you, right? I looked at them, really looked at them. The smug satisfaction on Terrence's face, the cruel amusement in Ashley's eyes, the deep abiding shame in my mother's expression. They enjoyed this. They fed on it. My humiliation was their Christmas dinner. I said, I do not have cash. I repeated, my voice cutting through the laughter like a razor blade. I did not say I could not pay. I reached into the front pocket of my faded jeans. I moved slowly, deliberately. I did not dig around. I did not fumble. My fingers closed around the cold, heavy metal. I pulled it out. It was not a crumpled wad of bills. It was not a debit card from a local credit union. It was a single sleek rectangle of anodized titanium. It caught the light from the chandelier, gleaming with a dark matte finish. It was black, pitch black, and it made a distinct heavy sound as I placed it gently on the coffee table. Terrence reached out and snatched the card from the table before I could stop him. He held it up to the light, squinting at it with a theatrical frown. He flipped it over, then back again. His greasy thumb left a smudge on the matte titanium surface. What is this? He asked, his voice booming with amusement. There are no numbers on it. Is this a library card, Jasmine? Did you join a book club that gives out metal membership cards? Or is this one of those prepaid debit cards you buy at the pharmacy when you cannot get a bank account? He tossed it back onto the table. It landed with a heavy clatter that sounded like a judgment. Seriously, sis, he said, shaking his head. Do not embarrass us. If that thing declines, I am going to have to ask the Wilsons to spot me the cash, and I really do not want to do that. Just admit you cannot pay, and we will figure something out. Maybe you can mow my lawn for a year. I picked up the card. I wiped his fingerprint off with my thumb. I signaled to the head waiter who was hovering nervously by the door. He hurried over, holding the wireless card reader. He looked tired and ready to go home. He did not care about family drama. He just wanted to be paid. I held the card out. I did not say a word. The waiter took it. He looked at the weight of it in his hand. He looked at the color. His eyes widened. He looked at me and then back at the card. He knew. Anyone who worked in high-end service knew what that card was. It was the Centurion, the card that opened doors that were locked to everyone else. He inserted the chip into the reader. The room went silent. Terrence was smirking, ready to laugh when the machine made the angry buzzing sound of a decline. Viola was already sighing, preparing her lecture on financial responsibility. Beep, approved. The receipt printed instantly. $8,500. Gone. Just like that. The waiter tore off the receipt and handed it to me with both hands, his head bowed slightly lower than before. Thank you, Ms. Brooks, he said, his voice hushed with reverence. Will there be anything else for you tonight? Perhaps a bottle of the vintage reserve? No, thank you, I said, taking the receipt. I looked at my family. They were staring at the machine. They were confused. They did not understand how a library card could pay for a banquet. Well, Viola said, breaking the silence with a huff. I hope you enjoy paying the interest on that for the next 10 years, Jasmine. Maxing out a credit card does not make you rich. It makes you foolish. Now you are going to be drowning in debt just to prove a point. She shook her head, turning away from me as if I was a lost cause. Ashley laughed, sipping her wine. I give it a month before she is asking for a loan to pay the minimum balance, she whispered to Terrence. I stood up. I walked over to the dining table. The head chair, the one usually reserved for the head of the household, was empty. My father was sitting on the sofa looking defeated. Terrence was standing by the fireplace looking smug. I pulled out the heavy oak chair at the head of the table. The legs scraped against the floor, a harsh sound that made everyone look at me. I sat down. I crossed my legs. I poured myself a glass of wine from the bottle Terrence had claimed was for VIPs only. I took a slow, deliberate sip. Actually, Mom, I said, setting the glass down. The interest will not be a problem. I did not use credit. I just sold my company. The words hung in the air for a moment, heavy and improbable. I sold my company. They echoed in the silence of the opulent dining room, bouncing off the crystal and the silk and the lies. Then Terrence let out a sound that was half snort, half guffaw. It started low in his chest and erupted into a full-blown table-slapping laugh. He doubled over, clutching his stomach, his face turning a blotchy red. "You sold the app," he gasped, wiping a tear from his eye. "Oh, that is precious. Jasmine, seriously, you almost had me there for a second. What did you get for it? Did some college kid buy it for his senior project? Did you get $5,000? Is that what this is about? You got 5 grand and now you think you are Oprah." He looked around the room, inviting everyone to share in the joke. Ashley was already giggling behind her hand, her eyes dancing with cruel amusement. Even Pastor Jenkins cracked a smile, shaking his head, as if witnessing the antics of a delusional child. $5,000, Ashley chimed in, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. Honey, that might cover your rent for a few months if you are careful. Maybe you can finally buy some clothes that fit. But seriously, who would buy that thing? It was for people with bad credit, right? I bet the only people who downloaded it were trying to figure out how to scam the system. Viola sighed, a long, weary sound that spoke of years of burdened motherhood. She set her wineglass down with a sharp click. "Jasmine, stop it," she said, her voice stern. "Just stop. You are doing it again. You are lying to make yourself look important. You are just like your father was before I took control. Always dreaming big, always talking about the next big thing and never delivering a single dime. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a daughter who has to make up stories just to feel adequate in front of her successful brother?" She looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain that made my skin crawl. "It is pathological," she continued, addressing the room as if I were a case study. "She has always been this way. Remember when she was 10 and told everyone she was going to be an astronaut? And then she failed algebra. It is the same thing. Delusions of grandeur to hide her mediocrity." I sat there calm in the center of their storm. I sipped my wine. I watched them laugh. I watched them mock. I watched them dig their own graves with every word. They were so sure of themselves, so sure of my failure. It was almost beautiful to watch, like seeing a car crash in slow motion. Terrence wiped his face, still chuckling. All right, he said, catching his breath. "Let us humor her. How much, Jasmine? How much did you get for your little digital lemonade stand?" 10,000, 20. "Come on, impress us. Tell us you made enough to buy a used Honda." I checked my watch. The second hand swept past the 12. It was exactly 8 o'clock. The markets in Asia were opening. The press releases were hitting the wires. The embargo was lifted. "It is time," I said softly. I stood up and walked over to the side table where the remote control for the massive flat-screen TV lay. The TV was currently off, a black mirror reflecting the distorted image of my family. "What are you doing?" Viola snapped. "Sit down, Jasmine. We are not watching TV during Christmas dinner. It is rude. I ignored her. I pointed the remote at the screen and pressed the power button. The screen flared to life. Just watch, I said. The screen flickered to life, revealing the crisp, high-definition studio of a financial news network. I flipped through the channels, ignoring the groans from the sofa. Terrence threw his hands up in exasperation. "Are you serious?" he shouted. "The game is on. It is the fourth quarter. Turn that boring stuff off. Nobody wants to watch the stock market on Christmas." Ashley chimed in, her voice shrill. "Yeah." Jasmine put the game back on. "We were watching that. You cannot just hijack the TV because you are having a tantrum. God, you are so childish." I kept clicking until I found the Bloomberg channel. The ticker tape at the bottom of the screen was moving fast, a relentless stream of numbers and symbols. But above it, the banner was flashing bright red. Breaking news. The anchor, a serious-looking woman with perfect hair, was speaking with urgency. "We are interrupting our scheduled programming for a major announcement in the financial technology sector," she said. "A deal that has stunned Wall Street and Silicon Valley alike." Viola stood up, marching toward me. "Give me the remote, Jasmine," she demanded. "I have had enough of this. You are ruining the evening. First the bill, now this. I do not know what has gotten into you, but I will not have it in my house." She reached for the remote, but I held it out of reach. I pointed at the screen. "Look," I said. "Just look." The graphic on the screen changed. It showed a logo. A simple, elegant logo of a stylized bridge. My logo. The logo of Credit Builder. The text below it read, "FinTech Mega Deal of the Year." Viola froze. Her hand hovered in mid-air. She recognized the logo. She had seen it on my laptop screen once when she was telling me to stop wasting my time. "What is that?" she whispered. Terrence squinted at the TV. "Wait," he said. "Isn't that your little app logo? Why is it on the news? Did you get sued? Did you steal money from people? I knew it. I knew you were running a scam." The anchor continued, her voice filling the silent room. "In a surprise move late this afternoon, Global Western Bank announced the acquisition of the Atlanta-based financial literacy platform, Credit Builder. The app, which helps underserved communities build credit history, has seen explosive growth in the last 18 months. Acquisition," Ashley said, sounding out the word like it was foreign. "That means someone bought it, right?" "Yes, Ashley," I said, not taking my eyes off the screen. "Someone bought it." The screen changed again. This time it was a photograph. A professional high-resolution photograph taken in a boardroom in New York City just 3 days ago. In the center of the photo stood the CEO of Global Western Bank, one of the most powerful men in finance. And shaking his hand, wearing a white power suit that fit perfectly, looking confident and strong, was me. I was not the girl in the jeans and sweater being mocked in the living room. I was Jasmine Brooks, CEO. I looked powerful. I looked successful. I looked like I owned the room. The anchor voice dropped an octave for emphasis. "The all-cash deal is valued at an unprecedented $500 million, making it the largest acquisition of a minority-owned tech startup this decade. The founder, Jasmine Brooks, will remain on the board." The silence in the living room was absolute. It was a vacuum, a void where sound used to be. The only noise was the beating of my own heart and the voice from the TV confirming my reality. $500 million. I turned slowly to face them. I looked at Terrence, who was staring at the TV with his mouth hanging open like a fish. I looked at Viola, who had turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. I looked at Ashley, who was blinking rapidly as if trying to wake up from a dream. "That is me," I said, pointing at the woman on the screen who looked like a queen. "That is your failure. That is your disappointment. And that is $500 million. The news anchor continued speaking, but her voice seemed to be the only sound in the universe. "The deal finalized earlier today represents the largest fintech acquisition of the year. Jasmine Brooks, the sole founder and majority shareholder, will walk away with an estimated $500 million in cash." $500 million. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade that had just dropped. The anchor repeated it for emphasis. $500 million. It was a number so large it did not sound real. It sounded like Monopoly money. It sounded like a fantasy. But the text at the bottom of the screen confirmed it in bold white letters against a red background. 500 million. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy. It was suffocating. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. You could hear the rain tapping against the window pane. But inside the living room, nobody breathed. Nobody moved. It was as if a spell had been cast, turning my tormentors into stone statues. My mother Viola was gripping the armrest of her chair so hard her knuckles were white. Her mouth was slightly open but no sound came out. She was processing the math. She was calculating how many times she had called me a failure. She was realizing that the daughter she had banished to the kitchen table was now richer than everyone she had ever met combined. I looked at Terrence, the golden child, the man who had just tipped a delivery driver with my $20 because he was supposedly too rich to carry small bills. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. All the swagger was gone. All the bravado had evaporated. He stared at the screen with a look of pure, unadulterated horror. He was not looking at a news report. He was looking at his own irrelevance. He was looking at a number that dwarfed his entire existence. I stood up slowly. The movement drew their eyes. They looked at me with fear now. Pure fear. I was not Jasmine the disappointment anymore. I was Jasmine the billionaire. I was a force of nature they could not control. I walked over to Terrence. I stood right in front of him. I leaned down so our faces were level. "You asked me a question earlier," I said, my voice cutting through the dead silence. "You asked me what I got from my little digital lemonade stand. You asked if I made $5,000. You asked if I could afford a used Honda." I pointed at the screen where the number was still flashing. "That is the answer, Terrence," I whispered. $500 million. That is what I am worth. What are you worth, Terrence? He tried to speak. He tried to say something, anything to regain his power. But his brain had short-circuited. His hand, which was holding a glass of the expensive red wine he had forbidden me from drinking, began to tremble. It shook violently. His fingers lost their grip. The crystal glass slipped. It fell in slow motion. It hit the pristine white carpet that Viola protected like a holy relic. It shattered. Dark red wine exploded outward, staining the white wool like a gunshot wound. The stain spread rapidly, soaking into the expensive fibers, but Terrence did not even look down. He just stared at me, terrified. Viola sounded like she was choking on air. Her hands were trembling so badly that her fake Louis Vuitton bag slid off her lap and hit the floor with a thud, but she did not even flinch. She just kept staring at the television screen and then back at me, as if trying to reconcile the two images. The girl she sent to the kitchen and the woman who just conquered Wall Street. 5, she stammered, her voice cracking. 500 million. She said the words slowly, tasting them, testing them to see if they would dissolve. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Is that?" She swallowed hard. "Is that US dollars, Jasmine?" I leaned back in the heavy oak chair, the wood cool against my back. I looked at her with a calmness that scared them more than my anger ever could. "Yes, Mom," I said smoothly. "United States dollars. Cash, not credit, not stock options that might vest in 5 years. Cash." I picked up the wine glass I had poured earlier. I swirled the dark liquid, watching it coat the sides of the crystal. Now, to be fair, I continued, my voice conversational, as if discussing the weather. "I do not keep every single penny of that headline number. There are taxes, of course. Federal capital gains, state taxes, and I set aside a significant portion, about $50 million, for the early employees who helped me build the platform. My receptionist is going to be a millionaire tomorrow, because unlike this family, I believe in rewarding loyalty." Terrence made a sound like a wounded animal, He was still staring at the red wine stains spreading on the carpet, but I knew he was listening to every word. He was doing the math in his head. He was realizing that my secretary was now richer than he would ever be. So I said, taking a slow, deliberate sip of the wine. It was a bit dry, but it tasted like victory. When the dust settles and the IRS is paid, I will clear approximately $320 million. It was deposited into my private wealth management account this morning before I got on the plane. 320 million, Viola whispered. It was a whisper of pure reverence. It was the way people spoke in church. I set the glass down with a soft click. It is a comfortable amount, I said, looking around the room at the expensive furniture and the rented art. It is enough to buy this house, Mom. In fact, it is enough to buy this house and the house next door. Actually, I could probably buy every single house on this street and turn them into parking lots if I wanted to. I could buy the country club you have been trying to get into for 10 years and fire the board. I could buy Terrence's real estate firm and turn it into a shelter for stray cats. I paused, letting the reality of that power settle over them like a heavy blanket. It is enough money that I never have to listen to anyone tell me I am not good enough ever again. I looked at Viola. I expected to see shame. I expected to see regret for the years of neglect, for the insults, for the kitchen table. But as I watched, the shock began to fade from her face. The color returned to her cheeks. Her posture straightened. And then I saw it. The shift. Her eyes changed. The cold, hard look of disdain that I had known my entire life vanished. But it was not replaced by love. It was replaced by a hunger so raw and so intense it made my skin crawl. Her pupils dilated, her lips parted slightly. She was looking at me, but she was not seeing her daughter. She was seeing a golden goose. She was seeing a blank check. She was seeing her own salvation. The contempt was gone, and in its place was a terrifying predatory greed. Suddenly the silence broke. It shattered like the wine glass on the floor. Viola let out a wail that sounded more like a revival tent than a living room. She threw her hands up toward the ceiling as if the Holy Spirit had just entered her body. "Praise Jesus," she screamed. "My baby, my brilliant baby girl, I knew it. I always knew it." She launched herself out of the armchair with a speed I did not think her knees were capable of. She rushed toward me, her arms wide open, tears already streaming down her face. It was a masterclass in manipulation. "Jasmine," she sobbed, crashing into me. "Mama is so proud of you. Do you hear me? So proud. I knew you had greatness in you. That is why I was so hard on you, baby. I had to be. I had to push you. Iron sharpens iron, Jasmine. I was the hammer and you were the steel. I broke you down so you could build yourself up into this. Into a queen." She wrapped her arms around my neck, burying her face in my shoulder. I smelled her expensive perfume mixed with the scent of desperation. She was hugging a lottery ticket, not a daughter. I sat there stiff as a board. I did not hug her back. I did not pat her hair. I stared straight ahead over her shoulder at the wall, where my family photos should have been, but never were. From the floor, Ashley was moving like a blur. She had grabbed a linen napkin and was frantically dabbing at the red wine stain on the white carpet, but her eyes were fixed on me. I told him, she babbled, her voice high and breathless. "I told Terrence just last week. I said Jasmine has that billionaire mindset. Didn't I say that, Terrence? I said she moves in silence like a real boss." "Oh my God, Jasmine, I love your boots. Are those vintage? You have such an eye for fashion. We should go shopping together. Just us girls. I can help you pick out a new wardrobe for your board meetings. We can build your personal brand on Instagram." She crawled closer on her knees, ignoring the wine soaking into her dress, looking up at me like a faithful dog waiting for a scrap. Terrence was still standing there, looking like he had been lobotomized, but Viola was squeezing me tighter, rocking me back and forth. "My baby is a mogul," she crooned. "We are going to do such great things. The family is back together. We are going to show this city what the Brooks family is really made of. You and me against the world, sugar. just like it used to be. It was suffocating. The lies were physical things pressing against my skin. She was rewriting history in real time, erasing decades of neglect with one hug. She thought she could just embrace the money, and I would be so grateful for the affection that I would forget she sent me to eat in the kitchen an hour ago. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was heavier than the gold bullion I could now afford. I reached up and grabbed her wrists. Her skin was soft, pampered with creams I could never touch growing up. I pulled her hands off my shoulders. I did not do it gently. I used force. I pushed her back until she stumbled slightly, her heels catching in the carpet. She looked at me shocked. Her tear-stained face froze. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice was low, but it carried across the room. "Do not ever touch me again. And stop acting mom." The show is over. Terrence recovered faster than a cockroach after a nuclear blast. One minute he was trembling in fear, and the next he was adjusting his cuffs and smoothing down his tie. He saw my rejection of our mother not as a warning sign, but as an opening. He pulled a chair from the dining table and dragged it over the expensive rug right up next to me. He sat down so close our knees were almost touching. He leaned in, his voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper he used when he was trying to sell a house with a leaking roof to a first-time buyer. "Look, Jasmine," he said, his eyes darting around the room to make sure the others were distracted by my mother hysterics. "Mom is old school. She does not get it. She does not understand how the world works now. But you and me, we are the same. We are the new generation. We are the builders." He paused, waiting for me to nod. I stared at him blankly. He took that as encouragement. "I am so proud of you, sis," he continued, lying through his teeth. 500 million. That is real power. But you know what they say? Cash is trash. You cannot just let that money sit in a bank account getting eaten by inflation. You need to put it to work. You need hard assets. He licked his lips. It was a nervous tick I remembered from when we were kids, right before he would ask to borrow my allowance. "I have this project in Midtown," he said. "It is quiet, off-market, prime commercial real estate right next to the new transit hub. The banks are dragging their feet because they do not have the vision. They do not see what we see, but I need to move fast or I am going to lose the option." He placed his hand on my knee. I had to use every ounce of my willpower not to recoil. "I just need a bridge loan," he said. "Small potatoes for you now. Just 2 million. 2 million to secure the land and get the permits. I will give you equity. We can be partners. The Brooks siblings taking over Atlanta. We can double your money in 18 months. What do you say? Keep it in the family." I looked at him. The audacity was breathtaking. 10 minutes ago, he was mocking my clothes and stealing $20 from my purse. Now he wanted 7 figures. He wanted me to bankroll his fantasy life. He thought because I had money, I had suddenly developed amnesia. I smiled at him. It was a slow, sharp smile that did not reach my eyes. 2 million, I asked. "Yes." He breathed, his eyes lighting up with greed. "Just 2. I can have the paperwork drawn up by Monday." "Okay," I said. He pumped his fist in the air. "Yes," he hissed. "That is what I am talking about. That is business. You are smart, Jasmine. I always knew you were smart." But I continued, cutting off his celebration. "Before we sign any new contracts, Terrence, we have to clear the ledger. We have to talk about the old debts." He frowned, confusion clouding his face. "Old debts?" he asked. "What are you talking about?" "I do not owe you anything. I mean, besides that, 20 for the tip, which I will get back to you, I swear." "Not the 20, I said. The other debts. The real debts." I reached down into my large leather tote bag. It was heavy. It had been heavy on my shoulder all night, a physical burden I was more than ready to put down. I bypassed the gift boxes. I bypassed my wallet. My hand closed around a thick manila envelope. It was bulging with papers. It was bound with a thick rubber band. I pulled it out. I slammed it down on the coffee table. It hit the wood with a dull, heavy thud that silenced the room instantly. The sound echoed like a judge gavel. What is that? Terence asked, his smile faltering. This, I said, placing my hand on the stack, is a forensic accounting of our relationship, and it is time to pay up. I picked up the first stack of documents from the folder. They were old papers, copies of credit reports, and bank statements dating back a decade. The paper felt brittle in my hands, a physical relic of a trauma I had carried in silence for a third of my life. I tossed them onto the glass coffee table. They fanned out, revealing the damning numbers and dates. Do you recognize these, Terence? I asked, my voice deceptively calm. Terence leaned forward, squinting. He picked up a sheet. His eyes scanned it, and the color drained from his face faster than water from a broken dam. He dropped the paper as if it were burning hot. I do not know what that is, he stammered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Some old bills. So what? Everyone has debt. Not everyone has debt in someone else's name, I corrected him. I looked at the rest of the family. 10 years ago, I was a sophomore in college. I had a scholarship. I had a part-time job. I was doing everything right. I applied for my first off-campus apartment. It was a tiny studio with a leaking faucet, but it was going to be mine. The landlord called me back the next day. He laughed at me. He said he would not rent a cardboard box to someone with a credit score of 420. Ashley gasped. Even she knew that score was practically a death sentence. I did not understand. I continued. I had never owned a credit card. I had never taken out a loan. So I requested my credit report, and guess what I found? I pointed at the papers on the table. 5 credit cards. Opened in my name. Using my social security number. Maxed out. Defaulted. Sent to collections. Total outstanding balance, $50,000. I looked at Terence. He was shrinking in his chair, trying to make himself small. You bought a BMW, Terence. You bought custom suits. You took a trip to Miami with your friends, and you did it all by stealing the identity of your 20-year-old sister. Terence tried to laugh, but it came out as a dry choke. Jasmine, come on. That was ages ago. I was young. I was just borrowing your credit. I meant to pay it back. I just got behind. You are rich now. What is 50 grand to you? It cost me 5 years of my life, I shouted, my control slipping for just a second. I spent 5 years paying off your joyrides. I ate ramen noodles every night. I slept in my car for 3 weeks because no one would sign a lease with me. I almost dropped out of school because I could not get student loans with that black mark on my record. You did not just borrow money, you stole my future. You buried me before I even had a chance to start. The room was dead silent. The shame was palpable, thick and suffocating. But I was not done. I turned my head slowly toward Viola. She was staring at her hands, refusing to look at me. She was trembling. And here is the worst part, I said softly. I reached into the folder and pulled out a printout of an email. It was dated 10 years ago. I found this on the old family computer when I came home for Thanksgiving that year. It is an email from the bank alerting you to suspicious activity on my account. They called you because you were listed as the backup contact. I slammed the email down in front of her. You knew, Mom. You knew he did it. You knew he stole my identity, and you did not call the police. You did not tell me. You deleted the email and you let me drown. Why, Mom? Why did you protect a thief and let your daughter sleep in a car? Viola stared at the email printout. The date was undeniable. The sender was the bank. The recipient was her personal email address. She could not claim ignorance anymore. She slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were wet, but they were not soft. They were hard with the conviction of a martyr. He was drowning, Jasmine, she said, her voice shaking with a twisted mix of defiance and pleading. He had lost his job. His girlfriend was pregnant. He needed that car to look successful. He needed those suits to get clients. In this world, a black man without status is a target. I had to protect him. What was I supposed to do? Call the police on my own son? Send him to prison over some plastic cards? I felt like I had been slapped. The room spun slightly. So you decided to sacrifice me instead? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You decided that his image was more important than my survival. You watched me struggle, Mom. You watched me eat peanut butter for dinner for 3 years. You watched me cry because I could not get approved for a car loan to get to work. And you knew the whole time. You knew it was him. I had to make a choice, Viola snapped, regaining her strength. You were always the strong one. You were resilient. I knew you would figure it out. You always land on your feet. But Terrence, he is fragile. He needs support. He needs the wind beneath his wings. I did what any mother would do. I protected the child who needed it most. No, I said. You did not protect him. You enabled him. You taught him that he could steal from women and get away with it. You taught him that his wants were more important than my needs. You burned my future to keep him warm. Viola waved her hand dismissively, knocking the email off the table. It fluttered to the floor, landing near her fake designer shoes. Oh, stop being so dramatic, she huffed. Look at you now. You are standing there in a $1,000 sweater worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It all worked out in the end, didn't it? You are rich. You are successful. Why are you holding on to old grudges? The debt is gone. The past is dead. Can you not just be grateful that your brother is safe and you are wealthy? Why do you have to be so petty? Petty. She called me petty for being angry about 5 years of financial ruin. She thought money erased trauma. She thought $500 million could buy back the nights I spent sleeping in my car, terrified of the dark. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who gave me life and then stole it away to feed her golden boy. You think it is over? I asked, my voice drop dead calm. You think because I have money now the bleeding has stopped. You think that was the only secret I found in these files. I reached back into the folder. My hand closed around the second document. It was heavier than the credit report. It carried the weight of their entire false reality. We are not done, Mom, I said, pulling the paper out. Not even close. We need to talk about this house. The house you think you own. The house you are standing in right now. I watched the second document slide across the glass table. It spun slowly before coming to a stop right in front of my mother's hands. It was a single sheet of paper, but it carried more weight than the entire house we were standing in. It was printed on thick pink paper, the color of emergency, the color of disaster. At the top in bold black letters it read, "Notice of default and intent to sell." Viola looked at it. She frowned. She did not understand what she was seeing. It did not make sense to her. In her mind, this house was her fortress. It was the physical proof of her status in Buckhead. It was the castle she had ruled for 30 years. What is this? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Why do you have a legal notice for my house? This must be a mistake, Jasmine. Your father paid off the mortgage 15 years ago. We own this house free and clear. We do not owe the bank a dime. She looked at Otis for confirmation. My father nodded vigorously. That is right, he said, finding his voice for the first time in an hour. I wrote the final check myself. We had a burning party for the mortgage note. This is just some spam, Jasmine, some scam to get us to refinance. Throw it away. I shook my head slowly. I felt a strange mixture of pity and revulsion. They were so confident in their ownership, so sure of their safety. It is not spam, Dad, I said, my voice soft but filling the room. And you did own it free and clear, until 11 months ago. I turned my gaze to Terrence. He was not looking at the paper. He was looking at the floor, his hands gripping his knees so hard, his knuckles were white. He was sweating, profuse beads of perspiration rolling down his forehead. He knew exactly what that pink paper was. He had probably thrown away 5 of them in the last month, hoping they would just disappear. Tell them, Terrence, I said. Tell them what you did last February. Terrence did not speak. He could not breathe. Viola looked from me to Terrence. A flicker of doubt crossed her face. Terrence, she asked, her voice rising in pitch. What is she talking about? When he did not answer, I answered for him. Do you remember the papers he brought you last winter, Mom? I asked. He told you it was for estate planning. He told you it was to put the house in a trust, to protect it from taxes. He said it was a smart business move to secure the family legacy. You signed them without reading them because you trust him, because he is your brilliant businessman's son. Viola nodded slowly, the memory surfacing. Yes, she whispered. He said it was for asset protection. It was not a trust, I said. It was a home equity line of credit. A second mortgage. He used your power of attorney and your signatures to take out a loan against the full value of this house. $200,000. Viola gasped. She grabbed her chest. 200,000? Yes, I said. And do you know where that money went? It did not go into a trust. It did not go into renovations. I looked at Terrence with disgust. He put it all into cryptocurrency, Terrence. Dogecoin, NFTs, digital pictures of monkeys. He gambled your house on internet coins because he thought he was smarter than the market. He thought he could turn 200,000 into 2 million overnight and pay you back before you ever noticed. I paused, letting the horror sink in. But the market crashed, Mom. It all went to zero. He lost every single penny. And he has not made a payment on the loan in 6 months. That piece of paper says the bank is seizing this property. The sheriff is scheduled to auction this house on the courthouse steps next Tuesday at 10 in the morning. The room spun. Ashley looked like she was going to be sick. Otis slumped onto the sofa as if his strings had been cut. But Viola just stared at her son. Her golden boy. The one she protected when he stole my identity. The one she sacrificed me for. Terrence, she whispered. Tell me she is lying. Tell me you did not gamble our home. Terrence slid out of his chair. He did not stand up. He slid down until his knees hit the expensive rug. He clasped his hands together in a prayer of desperation. Tears were streaming down his face, ruining his spray tan. He looked up at his mother like a frightened child. Mom. I am so sorry, he sobbed, his voice breaking into a high-pitched whine. I just wanted to help. I just wanted to be the hero. I thought if I could double the money I could buy you a vacation home. I was trying to win it back, Mom. I swear, I had a system. It was supposed to go up. I was going to fix it. I was going to fix everything before you found out. Otis reached out and took the pink paper from the table. His hands were shaking so bad the paper rattled like dry leaves in a storm. He brought it close to his face, squinting as if he could not believe the words printed there. Notice of default. Intent to sell. He read it once. Then he read it again. I watched his face change. The fear melted away and was replaced by something I had never seen in my father before. A cold, hard rage. He looked up from the paper and stared at the house around him. He looked at the walls he had painted. He looked at the floors he had paid to refinish. He looked at the life he had worked 40 years to build. And then he looked at Terrence. Terrence was still on his knees, sobbing into his hands. He looked pathetic. He looked weak. He looked like exactly what he was. A thief who had been caught. Otis walked over to him. He moved slowly like a man walking through water. He stood over his son. Stand up, Otis said. His voice was a low growl. Terrence looked up, his eyes red and puffy. Dad, please, he whimpered. I can fix it. Stand up, Otis roared. Terrence scrambled to his feet, cowering. He raised his hands as if to protect his face, but he was too slow. Otis pulled his hand back and swung. Crack. The sound of the slap was louder than the gunshot of a starting pistol. It echoed off the high ceilings. It was a sound of pure disappointment. Terrence's head snapped to the side. He stumbled back, clutching his cheek. He looked at his father with shock. Otis had never hit him. Not once. Not when he failed a class. Not when he wrecked the car. Not ever. You sold my house, Otis whispered, his voice trembling. You stole my home. I worked every day of my life for this house. I broke my back for this house, and you gambled it away on imaginary money. Viola rushed forward, throwing herself between them. She pushed Otis back, her hands on his chest. Stop it, Otis, she screamed. Do not touch him. He is your son. He is a thief. Otis shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Terence. "He is a liar and a thief! He made a mistake!" Viola yelled back, her face twisted in desperate defense. "It was the market, Otis. The market crashed. It is not his fault the economy is bad. He was trying to help us. He wanted to buy us a vacation home. He had good intentions." "Good intentions do not pay the mortgage," Viola Otis screamed. "He is a victim, too," Viola insisted, wrapping her arms around Terence, who was now sobbing into her shoulder. "The world is hard on black men, Otis. He was trying to get ahead. You should be supporting him, not hitting him when he is down." I watched them. I watched my mother comfort the man who had destroyed their lives while my father stood there broken. It was the same dynamic playing out again. The golden child could do no wrong, even when he burned the house down. I checked my watch again. "You can argue about his intentions all night," I said, my voice cutting through their screaming match. "But it does not change the timeline." I pointed at the calendar on the wall. "Today is Christmas Eve. That notice says the final judgment was entered 3 weeks ago. The redemption period expires on Monday." I looked at Viola, who was stroking Terrence's hair. "The bank is not coming to talk, Mom. They are not coming to negotiate. They are coming with the sheriff. They will be here on Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock. And they are bringing a locksmith to change the locks on the doors. You have 4 days to pack 30 years of your life into boxes." The silence that followed my announcement about the sheriff coming was broken not by a sob, but by a scream. It came from the corner of the room where Ashley had been standing frozen like a statue. The reality of the situation had finally penetrated the layers of denial and hairspray she wore like armor. She looked at the pink foreclosure notice on the table. She looked at her husband cowering on the floor. And then she looked at the G-Wagon keys sitting on the entry table. The illusion she had married into the lifestyle she had curated for Instagram, the envy of her friends, it was all evaporating like mist in the sun. "You are broke!" she shrieked. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was not the sweet, syrupy voice she used to ask for favors. It was the voice of a woman who realized she had bet on the wrong horse. "You do not have any money, do you? The deals, the investors, the Skyline project, it is all a lie. You are not a developer. You are just an unemployed con artist with a rental car." Terence tried to reach for her hand, but she recoiled as if he were contagious. "Baby, please," he begged. "It is just a liquidity crunch. I can fix it. I just need time." "Time," she yelled. "You have 4 days until we are homeless, Terence. 4 days. And you are asking me for time. You told me this house was our safety net. You told me we would inherit it. You told me we were building generational wealth." She started clawing at her left hand. She was trying to get her wedding ring off. It was a massive diamond, or at least what we all thought was a diamond. She yanked it over her knuckles, scratching her skin in the process. "I bet this is fake too, isn't it?" she spat, throwing the ring at him. It hit him in the chest and bounced onto the carpet, getting lost in the deep pile. "I bet it is glass, just like your career, just like your promises, just like you." "Ashley, stop!" Viola cried out, trying to salvage the wreckage of her son's marriage. "Do not do this. Marriage is for better or for worse." "For worse," Ashley laughed, a hysterical sound. "Viola, this is not worse. This is criminal. This is fraud. And you knew. You let him do it. You let him parade around like a king while he was robbing you blind." She turned back to Terence, her eyes blazing with a new realization. "Oh my God," she whispered. "My dad." Terrence's face went from pale to gray. He started shaking his head. "No, Ashley, do not bring that up. You borrowed $50,000 from my father last month," Ashley screamed. "You told him it was for a guaranteed bridge loan for a commercial property. You said you would pay him back with 20% interest by Christmas. That was his retirement money, Terence. He was going to buy a boat. I spent it," Terence whispered. "I tried to buy the dip. I thought crypto was coming back. You stole from my father," Ashley roared. "You stole from your sister. You stole from your parents. You are a monster." She grabbed her purse from the sofa. She did not look at Viola. She did not look at Otis. She looked at me for 1 second. There was no apology in her eyes, Just the cold calculation of a survivor realizing she needed to jump ship. "I am leaving," she announced. "I am taking the kids, and I am going to my mother's house. Do not follow me, Terrence. If you show up at my parents' house, my dad will shoot you, and I will help him reload." She marched to the door. The sound of her heels on the hardwood was like nails in a coffin. She slammed the door so hard the wreath fell off the hook and crashed to the floor. The ornaments shattered. The room was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a battlefield after the slaughter. The perfect family portrait was slashed down the middle. Ashley was gone. The money was gone. The house was gone. And all that was left were the lies. The front door slammed shut behind Ashley, leaving a silence that felt heavier than the house itself. The only sound was the ragged breathing of my mother Viola, who was staring at the door as if willing her daughter-in-law to walk back through it. Otis was still standing over Terrence, who was curled into a ball on the floor, weeping into the expensive rug he had ruined with wine. The illusion was gone. The perfect family was gone. All that was left was the debt and the desperation. Viola turned her head slowly. Her eyes landed on me. For a moment I saw the old hatred, the resentment she always held for me. But then it flickered and died, replaced by something far more pathetic. Hope. She realized in that instant that I was the only person in the room who wasn't drowning. I was the life raft. "Jasmine," she said, her voice trembling. "Baby, you can help us." She took a step toward me, her hands reaching out. "You are rich," she said. $500 million. That is what the news said. That is more money than God. You can buy this house 100 times over. You can pay off the mortgage. You can fix this. She fell to her knees beside my chair, clutching the armrest. "Please, Jasmine," she begged. "This is your childhood home. You grew up here. You cannot let the bank take it. Think of the memories. Think of the Christmas mornings." I thought of the Christmas mornings. I thought of watching Terrence open the newest video game console while I got socks. I thought of being told to clean up the wrapping paper while they played. Terrence lifted his head from the floor. His face was a mess of tears and snot. He saw his mother begging and he crawled over, dragging himself across the carpet like a wounded animal. "Yes, Jasmine," he whimpered, grabbing the hem of my jeans. "You have to help. If I lose this house, if Ashley leaves me, I have nothing. I will go to jail. Dad will go to jail. You cannot let that happen to your family." He looked up at me, his eyes wide and pleading. "I will do anything," he swore. "Anything. You want me to work for you. I will do it. I will fetch your coffee. I will wash your car. I will be your driver. I will be your slave, Jasmine. Just pay off the debt. 200,000 is nothing to you. It is pocket change. Please, just write a check. Just make it go away." Otis looked at me too. He did not beg. He just looked tired. He looked like a man who had been carrying a heavy load for too long and had finally collapsed under the weight. "Jasmine," he said softly, "your mother is right. We cannot lose the house. We have nowhere else to go." I looked at them. The three of them clustered around my feet, begging for salvation. An hour ago, they were laughing at my clothes. An hour ago, they were telling me I was a failure. Now they were praying to me. I took a sip of my wine. It was warm now, but it still tasted good. "You want me to buy the house?" I asked. "Yes," Viola cried. "Yes, baby. Buy it. Keep it in the family. We can pay you rent. Or we can just manage it for you. Whatever you want. Just save us." I set the wine glass down on the table next to the foreclosure notice. I smoothed out the wrinkles in my sweater. I looked at Terrence, who was still clutching my leg. I gently kicked his hand away. "Get up, Terrence," I said. "You are ruining my denim." He scrambled back, wiping his hands on his pants. I looked at Viola. I smiled. It was a small secret smile. "Actually," I said, "you do not have to worry about the bank anymore." Viola let out a gasp of relief. She sagged against the chair, closing her eyes. "Oh, thank you, Jesus," she whispered. "Thank you." "I made a call this morning," I continued. "Before I even got on the plane. I spoke with the asset manager at the bank that holds the note on this house. I told him I was interested in the property. I told him I wanted to settle the debt immediately." Terrence started laughing, a hysterical, relieved sound. "I knew it," he said. "I knew you would not let us down. You are the best sister in the world, Jasmine. I swear I will make it up to you. I will build you a statue." Otis wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Thank you, daughter," he said. "You saved us." They were all smiling now. They were all breathing easier. The nightmare was over. The rich sister had come to the rescue just like they always expected her to deep down. They thought they had won. They thought they had gotten away with it. I leaned forward. I picked up the foreclosure notice. I folded it neatly in half. "I think you misunderstand," I said softly. "I did not pay off the mortgage for you." I watched the smiles spread across their faces. It was fascinating to see how quickly they forgot their cruelty the moment they thought they were safe. Viola was already planning her next bridge club meeting in her head. Terrence was probably already thinking about how to spin this to his friends. They thought they had won. They thought money had made me soft. They thought that because I had opened my wallet, I had closed my heart to the past. I cleared my throat. The sound cut through their celebration like a knife. "I think you are confused," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "I did not pay off the mortgage as a gift. I did not give the bank $200,000 to clear Terrence's debt." Viola frowned, her smile wavering slightly. She tilted her head, looking at me like a dog that heard a high-pitched whistle. "What do you mean, baby?" she asked. "You said you settled it. You said you spoke to the manager." "I said I settled the debt with the bank," I corrected. "That means I purchased the note. I bought the debt from them for cash this morning. The bank does not own the mortgage anymore." I pointed a finger at my own chest. "I own the mortgage. I am the lender. I am the lien holder." Terrence let out a breathy laugh, wiping his nose on his sleeve. He looked relieved. He looked like he had just dodged a bullet. "Okay, sure," he said. "You are the bank. That is even better. We can work out a payment plan, or you can just write it off as a loss on your taxes. It is a family loan now, right? No interest, no pressure. I can pay you back when the market turns around." Viola clapped her hands together. "Exactly," she beamed. "Oh, Jasmine, you are so smart. Keeping the asset in the family, that is generational wealth building. The house is still ours, but now we do not have to worry about those nasty letters from the bank. We are safe. The house is safe." She looked around the room with a renewed sense of ownership. She smoothed her skirt. "We should redecorate," she announced. "Get rid of this bad energy, maybe new curtains. Since we do not have to pay the mortgage to the bank anymore, we can afford to spruce the place up. I never liked these drapes anyway." I stood up. I walked over to the fireplace. I looked at the family portrait hanging above the mantel. It was a picture of Viola, Otis, and Terrence taken 10 years ago. They were all wearing matching white outfits standing on a beach. I was not in it. I had been at college working double shifts at the diner to pay for the tuition they refused to help with. "You are not listening," I said, turning back to face them. The room went quiet again. The air grew cold. "I did not buy the note to save you," I said. "I bought the note because I wanted to control the asset." Viola's smile faltered completely. Her hands froze in mid-clap. "What do you mean, control the asset?" she whispered. "I mean that since the loan is in default and has been for 6 months, I have the legal right to accelerate the debt," I explained. "I have the right to demand full payment immediately, and if that payment is not made, I have the right to foreclose." "But you would not do that," Viola said, her voice trembling. "We are your family. You just said you bought it so the bank would not take it. You are my daughter. You would not put your own mother on the street." "I bought it so the bank would not take it," I agreed. "Because I wanted to take it." I walked back to the table and picked up the pink foreclosure notice. I held it up. "I am exercising my right as the lender," I said. "I am calling the loan." You owe me $200,000 plus interest plus legal fees. Can you pay me right now? No, Terrence squeaked. You know we cannot. Then the foreclosure proceeds, I said. But where will we live? Viola cried, looking at the walls as if they were melting. This is my house. I have lived here for 30 years. I raised you in this house. It is not your house, Mom, I said, my voice cold and hard. It has not been your house since Terrence signed it away. It was the bank house. And now it is my house. I looked her dead in the eyes. And I am selling it. You have 30 days, I said, my voice cutting through the hysteria in the room like a cold wind. The eviction notice is effective immediately. By January 24th, this house must be empty. Broom clean condition. No furniture, no personal items, and definitely no people. Viola made a sound that was less like a cry and more like a shriek of a banshee. She lunged forward, grabbing the edge of the dining table for support, her fake Louis Vuitton bag sliding unnoticed to the floor. Her face was a mask of contorted rage and disbelief. The sophisticated buckhead matriarch was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. You ungrateful heifer, she screamed. How dare you? I gave you life. I carried you in my body for 9 months. I fed you. I clothed you. And this is how you repay me, by kicking your own mother out into the street in the middle of winter. You are evil, Jasmine. You are a demon. I watched her tantrum with the same detached interest one might watch a reality TV show. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times before. Whenever she lost control, she played the victim. Whenever she was wrong, she screamed about gratitude. I am not evil, Mom, I said calmly, pouring the last of the wine into my glass. I am just a businesswoman protecting her investment. You taught me that. Remember, you always said feelings have no place in finance. Well, this is finance. You are putting us on the street, she wailed, turning to Otis for support, but finding none. Otis was sitting on the sofa staring at his hands, his spirit broken by the realization that his son had gambled away his legacy. We will be homeless, Viola sobbed. We will be destitute. My friends will laugh at me. The church will shun us. You are destroying our lives because you are bitter. You are a bitter, lonely girl who hates her family. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked driveway, where I had been forced to park my car around the corner just hours ago. Do you remember 7 years ago, Mom? I asked, not turning around. Do you remember the night you found out I had switched my major to computer science instead of pre-law? Viola stopped screaming. She sniffled, wiping her nose with a cocktail napkin. That was different, she muttered. You were throwing your life away. I was trying to save you. You came into my room at 2 in the morning. I continued, turning back to face her. You had a box of black trash bags. You pulled my clothes out of the closet and threw them on the floor. You told me that if I was going to make stupid decisions, I could make them under someone else's roof. You told me I had 1 hour to pack and get out. I walked closer to her. It was raining that night too, Mom. Just like tonight. I begged you. I told you I had nowhere to go. I told you I had no money because you controlled my savings account. Do you remember what you said to me as you locked the front door? Viola looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. You said, "You need to learn how the real world works, Jasmine. The real world does not care about your feelings. It cares about results. Sink or swim." I leaned in close so she could see the absolute lack of sympathy in my eyes. Well, Mom, I swam. I swam all the way to $500 million, and now you are the one sinking. I am just doing exactly what you taught me. I am giving you a lesson in how the real world works. Actions have consequences. Theft has consequences. Betrayal has consequences. Viola began to weep again, but it was softer now, defeated. She realized that her old weapon's guilt and shame no longer worked on me. I was bulletproof. So that is it, she whispered. You are just going to leave us to freeze. You are going to let your father sleep under a bridge. I looked at Otis, He looked old and frail. He had failed me, yes. He had been a coward, but he had not been malicious. He was just weak. And while I wanted justice, I was not a monster. I never said you were going to be homeless, I said, reaching into my bag one last time. Viola's head snapped up. Hope flickered in her teary eyes again, desperate and pathetic. I have made arrangements, I said, pulling out a set of keys. They jangled loudly in the silent room. I am not heartless, Mom. I would never let my parents sleep on the street. I have secured a new residence for you. It is fully paid for. Rent is covered for the next 5 years. You can move in tomorrow. I held up the keys. They were simple silver keys. No fancy fob. No Mercedes logo. Viola reached for them, her hands shaking. Oh, Jasmine, she breathed. I knew it. I knew you would not abandon us. Where is it? Is it the condos in Midtown? Or maybe one of those nice townhouses near the park? I smiled. It was the smile of the wolf who had finally cornered the sheep. Not exactly, I said. I dropped the keys into Viola's open palm. They landed with a light metallic clink. They did not feel heavy like the keys to a mansion. They felt light. They felt like survival. They felt like the bare minimum. Viola stared at them. She turned them over in her manicured fingers, looking for a remote entry fob or a luxury emblem. There was nothing. Just 2 simple silver keys on a plain wire ring. Where is this? She asked, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and dread. You said it was paid for. Is it the high-rise downtown? The one with the concierge? I shook my head slowly. It is an apartment complex in East Point, Mom, I said. The Gardens. Unit 2B. It is a sturdy brick building, 2nd floor walk-up. It has a bus stop right in front. You will need that since the repo man is coming for the Mercedes tomorrow morning. Viola choked. She looked as if I had just slapped her. East Point, she gasped the name, tasting like poison in her mouth. Jasmine, you cannot be serious. East Point is for regular people. It is for the help. It is miles away from the country club. It is miles away from my friends. I cannot live in East Point. I am Viola Brooks. You were Viola Brooks of Buckhead, I corrected her. Now you are Viola Brooks of East Point. It is a 1-bedroom apartment, Mom. 600 square feet. 1 bathroom. A kitchenette with a stove and a refrigerator. It is cozy, it is safe. And it is fully paid for, 5 years in advance. You will have a roof over your head. You will have heat. You will have water. That is more than you gave me when you kicked me out into the rain. 1 bedroom, she shrieked, her vanity overriding her survival instinct. But where will we put our things? Where will I put my clothes? My furniture? We need a guest room. We need space to entertain. You do not have furniture, Mom, I reminded her. The bank owns the furniture. You are taking your clothes and your personal items. That is it. You will have to share a closet. You will have to downsize. It is called living within your means. It is a lesson you should have learned 40 years ago. I leaned in closer, my shadow falling over her. But there are rules, I said, my voice hardening into steel. This lease is in my name. The power is in my name. The water is in my name. And I have one non-negotiable condition. If I find out that you have given Terrence a single dime, if I find out he is sleeping on your couch, if I find out you bought him a sandwich with the grocery money I send you, I will terminate the lease immediately. You will be on the street that same day. Do you understand me? Viola began to weep into her hands. But what will the ladies at church say? She wailed, rocking back and forth. They think we are wealthy. They think we are pillars of the community. If they find out I am living in a 1-bedroom apartment in East Point, they will laugh at me, Jasmine. I will be a laughingstock. I cannot show my face at Sunday service. You are humiliating me. You humiliated yourself when you let your son gamble away your dignity, I said. Otis stood up from the sofa. He walked over to Viola. He looked at the woman who had controlled his every move for 3 decades. He looked at her tears, and for the first time I saw no sympathy in his eyes, only exhaustion. He reached down and gently took the keys from her trembling hand. He held them tight in his fist. "It sounds peaceful," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "No mortgage, no keeping up appearances, no lies, just a place to sleep." "Thank you, Jasmine. We accept." "Otis." Viola shrieked, looking up at him in betrayal. "You cannot be serious. We are accustomed to a certain lifestyle." "That lifestyle is gone, Viola." He snapped, his voice cracking with the strain of finally finding his spine. It was a lie. It was a... "We are broke. We are old. And our daughter is offering us a lifeboat when we deserve to drown. I am taking it. You can come with me and learn to be humble, or you can stay here and wait for the sheriff to drag you out. It is your choice." Viola slumped in her chair, defeated by the reality of her husband finally standing up to her. She looked at the keys in Otis' hand with loathing, but she did not argue. She knew he was right. She had nowhere else to go. The fantasy was over. I watched them for a moment. The fallen queen and the tired king accepting their exile. It was done. They were handled. They would be safe, but they would no longer be proud. I turned my head slowly. My eyes locked onto the man still kneeling on the floor, wiping snot from his face. The source of the rot. The golden child who had turned into rust. "Now, Terence," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "it is your turn." I turned my full attention to the man kneeling on the carpet. Terence looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot and swollen. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. But this was not about a vase. This was about felonies. I reached into my bag one last time. I did not pull out a check. I did not pull out a gift. I pulled out a thick document bound in blue legal backing. It looked official. It looked heavy. I dropped it on the table in front of him. It landed with a sound that signaled the end of his life as he knew it. "Do you know what wire fraud is, Terence?" I asked, my voice calm and conversational. "It is when you use electronic communications to steal money. Like when you transferred the equity from this house into your crypto wallet. That is a federal crime. And identity theft. Using my social security number to open credit cards. That is another federal crime. And bank fraud. Forging mom and dad's signatures on loan documents. That is the trifecta." I tapped the blue folder with a manicured fingernail. "I have it all right here," I said. "The IP addresses. The transfer logs. The forged signatures compared against real ones. I hired a forensic document examiner, Terence. He is very good. He used to work for the FBI. In fact, he told me that if I handed this file to the U.S. Attorney Office, you would be looking at a minimum of 10 years in federal prison. Maybe 15 if the judge is in a bad mood." Terence let out a strangled sob. He grabbed the leg of the coffee table as if the room were spinning. "No, Jasmine, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "Not prison. I cannot go to prison. I am not built for that. They will kill me in there. I am your brother. You cannot send your own brother to jail." "You stopped being my brother when you stole my identity," I said coldly. "You are just a criminal who shares my last name. But because I am a generous woman, and because I do not want to visit you behind bars, I am going to offer you a plea deal." I flipped the blue document open to the last page. "Option 1, I said. I walk out of here with this file. I drive to the FBI field office on Monday morning. I hand it over. You get arrested. You go to trial. You lose. You go to prison until you are 50 years old." Terence was shaking his head violently, tears flying from his face. "No, no, no, option 2. "What is option 2? "Option 2, I said, pointing to the signature line. "You sign this. This is a confession of judgment. It is a legal document where you admit to everything. You admit to the debt. You admit to the fraud. And you agree to pay me back every single penny. $250,000. "I will pay it," he cried. "I swear I will pay it. Just give me time." "I am not done," I said, cutting him off. You are not going to pay me back with imaginary real estate deals, Terrence. You are going to get a job. A real job. Manual labor. Warehouse work. Delivery driving. I do not care what it is as long as it comes with a W-2 form. And this contract stipulates that 50% of your wages, 50% of every single dollar you earn, for the rest of your life will be automatically garnished and deposited into my account. You will live on minimum wage. You will live like the poor people you used to mock. You will work until your hands bleed, and you will pay me until the day you die, or the debt is cleared. He stared at me in horror. But that is slavery, he whispered. That will take forever. I will never have anything. I will never have a life. You stole my life for 7 years, I reminded him. Now I am taking yours. It is a fair trade. I took a heavy fountain pen out of my purse. I clicked the cap off. I held it out to him. Prison or payment, Terrence, I said. Those are your choices. The clock is ticking. He looked at his mother, but Viola had her face buried in her hands. He looked at his father, but Otis was staring at the wall. He was alone. He realized for the first time in his life that no one was coming to save him. He looked at the pen. He looked at the blue document that would chain him to me forever. He let out a whimper that sounded like a dying dog. His hand reached out, trembling uncontrollably. He grasped the pen. He pressed the nib to the paper. The scratching sound of his signature was loud in the silent room. He signed his name. He signed his life away. The ink was barely dry on the paperwork that enslaved Terrence to my bank account when the sound of chaos erupted from the second floor. It was the heavy thud of suitcases hitting hardwood floors and the frantic clicking of high heels pacing back and forth. It sounded less like packing and more like looting. Ashley was not taking her time. She was evacuating. A moment later, she appeared at the top of the grand staircase. She had shed her holiday hosting smile and replaced it with a look of pure survival instinct. She was dragging 2 massive designer suitcases behind her, bumping them loudly against every step as she descended. She had a garment bag thrown over one shoulder and her jewelry box tucked under her arm like a football. She was not looking at Terrence. She was not looking at any of us. She was looking at the front door with the laser focus of a prisoner seeing an open gate. Viola snapped out of her shock. She realized that her image of the perfect grandmother was about to walk out the door into the rain. She scrambled up from the armchair and rushed to the bottom of the stairs, blocking Ashley's path. "Ashley, stop!" Viola pleaded, her voice rising to a shriek. "You cannot just leave. It is Christmas Eve. The children are sleeping. You cannot take my grandbabies out into the storm." Ashley did not slow down. She reached the bottom step and kept moving, forcing Viola to back up. "Watch me," Ashley spat. "I woke them up. They are in the car. We are going to my mother's house where the mortgage is actually paid, and the heat will not be turned off next week." Viola grabbed the handle of one of the suitcases, trying to physically anchor her daughter-in-law to the house. "But we are family," Viola cried. "We can work this out. Jasmine is helping us. We have a place to live. You can come with us to the apartment. We can be together." Ashley laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that cut through the room. "I am not living in an apartment in East Point with you, Viola," she said, struggling to yank the suitcase free. "I did not marry Terrence for his personality. I married him because he promised me a life. He promised me security. He promised me this house. And it turns out he is just a broke liar who stole from my own father." She pulled hard, ripping the suitcase handle from Viola's grip. The force of it made Viola stumble back. "Do not touch my things," Ashley warned, her eyes narrowing. "I am taking what is mine. I am taking the jewelry he bought me with your money. I am taking the clothes, and I am taking the kids. You can keep your son. You deserve each other." Viola lunged forward again, grabbing Ashley's arm. "Please, Ashley, think of the family image. What will people say if you leave him on Christmas?" Ashley shoved her. It was not a gentle push. It was a shove born of humiliation and rage. Viola stumbled backward, her heels catching on the edge of the ruined white carpet. She fell hard onto the floor, landing next to the wine stain her son had created. "I do not care about your image," Ashley screamed, standing over her. "Your image is a lie, your son is a fraud, and this house is a tomb. I am done." She turned and marched to the heavy front door. She threw it open, letting a gust of freezing wind and rain blow into the foyer. The Christmas wreath which I had knocked down earlier skittered across the floor tiles. Outside, the headlights of her SUV were already on, cutting through the darkness. I could see the silhouettes of my niece and nephew in the back seat waiting to escape. Ashley did not look back. She did not say goodbye. She dragged her luggage out into the rain and slammed the door shut. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. A moment later, we heard the roar of the engine and the squeal of tires on wet pavement. Then there was silence. The house seemed to groan. The temperature dropped instantly as the chill from outside settled in. The illusion was completely shattered. The decorations looked tacky now. The tree looked sad. The expensive furniture looked like props on a stage where the play had gone horribly wrong. Viola sat on the floor weeping into her hands. Otis sat on the sofa staring at nothing. Terence lay curled up clutching the contract that ended his freedom. And I stood by the fireplace holding my glass of wine. The entourage was gone. The hangers-on were gone. The wives and the children were gone. It was just the four of us now. The same four people who had started this dysfunction 30 years ago, left alone in the wreckage of our own making. The heavy silence in the room was broken only by the sound of the rain drumming against the large windows. The drama had drained the energy out of the air, leaving only a stale scent of wine and regret. Viola was still on the floor, quietly weeping into her hands, mourning the loss of her social status more than the loss of her family. Terence was staring at the wall, holding the contract that ended his freedom. But Otis was moving. My father stood up from the sofa, his joints popped audibly in the quiet room. He looked older than he had this morning. The events of the last hour had aged him 10 years, carving deep lines of exhaustion into his face. He walked over to me. He did not look at Viola. He did not look at Terence. He looked only at me. He stopped a few feet away, maintaining a respectful distance, as if he was approaching a dangerous animal that he had once raised as a pet. "Jasmine," he said, his voice rough and raspy. I turned from the fire to look at him. I swirled the last sip of wine in my glass, waiting. "I am sorry," he said. It was simple. It was quiet. But it was the first honest thing anyone had said to me all night. "I know sorry does not fix it," he continued, his hands hanging uselessly by his sides. "I know it does not buy back the years. I saw you, Jasmine, when you were little and you would come to me crying because she had been cruel to you. I saw it. When you were eating alone in the kitchen tonight, I saw it. I always saw it." He took a shaky breath. "I told myself I was keeping the peace. I told myself I was a good husband by letting her run the house. But I was lying. I was just scared. I was scared of her temper. I was scared of the fighting. So I sacrificed you. I let you take the hit so I could have a quiet life. My silence was a choice, Jasmine, and it was the wrong choice. I failed you as a father. I failed to protect the one child who actually deserved it." I looked at him. I searched his eyes for the weakness I had always despised, but I found something else. I found a flicker of shame so deep it burned. I did not feel the anger I expected. I felt a cool, distant sadness. "I forgive you, Dad," I said softly. His shoulders sagged with relief, tears welling in his eyes. But I continued, my voice firming up. "Forgiveness does not mean we go back to how things were. I am not your little girl anymore. I am not the daughter you can ignore, and then expect to comfort you. I am a grown woman. I am your landlord. And I am your benefactor. The dynamic has changed. I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer. I pulled out a small white envelope. It was not thick, but it was important. I held it out to him. "What is this?" he asked, taking it hesitantly. "That is a debit card," I explained. "It is linked to a separate bank account I opened in your name only. There is $10,000 in there." He looked at the envelope and then back at me, confusion clouding his face. "Why?" he asked. "You already paid for the apartment. You are paying for the food. Because you need to learn how to stand up," I said. "That money is for you, Dad. Not for Viola. Not for the household. It is for you. If you need new shoes, you buy them. If you want to go to the barber, you go. You do not ask her for permission. You do not ask her for cash. You do not let her control your pockets anymore." I stepped closer to him, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "You are going to that apartment with her because you are loyal. But you are not going as her servant. You are 70 years old, but it is not too late to find your backbone. Do not let her spend this money. Do not let her give it to Terrence. If that balance hits zero because of them, I will not refill it. This is your seed money for dignity. Use it wisely." Otis gripped the envelope tight. He looked at it like it was a lifeline. He nodded slowly, understanding the assignment. "I understand, daughter," he whispered. "I will not waste it." He turned slowly. He looked across the room at Viola. She was still sitting on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her perfect Christmas. She looked up at him, her mascara running her face blotchy. She expected him to come to her. She expected him to help her up, to brush her off, to tell her it was all the bank fault. She reached a hand out to him, expecting the same obedience she had commanded for 40 years. "Otis," she whined, "help me up. My knees hurt." Otis stood there. He looked at her hand. He looked at her face. He did not move. He did not rush to her side. He looked at the woman he had shared a bed with for decades, the woman he had enabled, the woman he had feared. And for the first time in my life, I saw the look in his eyes change. The familiarity was gone. The fear was gone. He looked at her with a cold, detached curiosity, as if he was looking at a complete stranger. I stood over her, looking down at the woman who had dominated my existence for 27 years. Viola was still on the floor. Her legs were sprawled awkwardly, her expensive dress bunched up around her knees. She looked small. She looked fragile. For the first time in my life, she did not look like a giant. She looked like exactly what she was, an aging woman who had bet everything on a lie and lost. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in dark, jagged lines, making her look like a tragic clown. She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand, a gesture so unrefined she would have slapped me for doing it yesterday. "Why, Jasmine?" she whispered. Her voice was broken. It was a sound of pure confusion. "Why are you doing this to me? I am your mother. I gave birth to you. I suffered for you. How can you be so cruel? How can you hate the woman who gave you life?" She reached out a hand to grab the hem of my pants, but I stepped back just out of reach. I did not want her touch. I did not want her contamination. I looked at her with a clarity that felt like ice water in my veins. "You gave me biology, Mom," I said, my voice low and steady. "You gave me DNA. You gave me a roof over my head because the law required it. But you did not give me a mother." I walked a slow circle around her, forcing her to turn her head to follow me. "You did not love me," I continued. "You loved the idea of me. You loved having a daughter you could dress up like a doll for Christmas cards. You loved having a prop for your perfect family photos. But the moment I developed a personality that did not fit your script, you discarded me. You loved your status more than you loved your child. You loved the admiration of strangers at the country club more than you loved the girl crying in the next room." Viola shook her head, sobbing. "That is not true," she cried. "I loved you. I wanted the best for you." "No," I corrected her. "You wanted the best for you. You wanted a daughter who married a doctor and lived next door so you could brag to your friends. You did not want a daughter who built a tech company. You did not want a daughter who was smarter than your son, because my success made him look bad, and his image was your religion." I stopped in front of her again. I leaned down close enough to smell the stale perfume and the fear. "You always told me that business was about making hard choices," I said. "You told me that everything in this world has a value." "Well, Mom, this is my final business lesson to you." I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. "Everything has a price," I whispered. "The price of your vanity is this house. The price of your neglect is my indifference. And the price of your betrayal is your lifestyle. You sold my childhood to buy Terrence a safety net. You spent my happiness to purchase his comfort. And now the bill is due. You are a bankrupt mom, emotionally and financially." I stood up straight, adjusting my blazer. I looked at the room one last time. I looked at the crystal chandelier that I now owned. I looked at the white carpet that was ruined. I looked at the empty space on the wall where Ashley had ripped down a painting. It was just a house. It was just wood and stone and drywall. It held no magic. It held no love. It was just an asset on a balance sheet, and I was liquidating it. "Goodbye, Mom," I said. I did not wait for her answer. I did not wait for another lie. I turned my back on her. I walked past Otis, who was clutching his envelope of freedom. I walked past Terrence, who was staring at his feet. I walked across the foyer where I had stood so many times waiting for approval that never came. My heels clicked on the marble tiles, a rhythm of finality. Click-clack, click-clack. I reached the heavy front door. The brass handle was cold under my hand. I turned it. The latch clicked open. A gust of wind blew in, carrying the scent of rain and wet earth. It smelled like a storm, but to me it smelled like oxygen. I stepped over the threshold. I stepped out of the tomb and into the night. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, sealing the tomb of my childhood with a final decisive thud. I stood on the porch for a moment, letting the sound resonate in the night air. It was done. The screaming was over. The crying was over. The years of feeling small and insignificant were trapped behind that wood and glass barrier. I turned around and faced the driveway. The rain was coming down harder now, a freezing sheet of water that blurred the lights of the street lamps, but I did not feel cold. The wind whipped my hair across my face and it felt like a baptism. It felt like the air was scrubbing the scent of desperation and stale perfume off my skin. It was sharp and clean, and it smelled like absolute freedom. I started walking down the steps. My heels clicked on the wet stone. To my left sat the dented silver Toyota Corolla I had rented at the airport. It looked sad sitting there in the rain, a prop I no longer needed. I reached into my pocket to grab the keys, but then I saw the lights. Twin beams of pure white light cut through the darkness at the bottom of the long driveway. They swept across the wet pavement, illuminating the rain like falling diamonds. A low, powerful hum vibrated through the ground. It was not the rattling engine of a rental car. It was the purr of a predator. The vehicle emerged from the shadows, gliding over the asphalt with a ghostly smoothness. It was a Rolls-Royce Cullinan. It was painted a shade of black so deep it looked like a hole in the universe. It was massive, imposing, and utterly magnificent. It rolled up the driveway and pulled to a stop right in front of the porch, completely blocking the view of the Toyota. It dwarfed the rental car, making it look like a toy. The driver door opened instantly. Marcus, my head of security, stepped out. He was a mountain of a man in a perfectly tailored suit, unbothered by the weather. He snapped a large black umbrella open in one fluid motion and walked toward me. He held the umbrella over my head, shielding me from the storm. "Good evening, Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice deep and reassuring. "I trust the meeting went well." I looked at him. I looked at the car. I looked back at the house one last time. It went exactly as planned, Marcus, I said. We are done here. He nodded once, not asking questions. He walked me to the back door of the Rolls-Royce. He opened the suicide door, revealing an interior that glowed with the soft warmth of amber ambient lighting. I stepped inside. The transition was instant. The noise of the rain vanished. The cold wind was replaced by climate-controlled perfection. The smell of wet earth was replaced by the scent of hand-stitched leather and expensive wood. I sank into the massage seat. It hugged me. Marcus closed the door with a soft, heavy click that shut out the rest of the world. I was safe. I was in my own fortress now. I pressed a small button on the center console. A panel slid open, revealing a crystal flute and a chilled bottle of Krug. I poured myself a glass. The bubbles fizzed softly, a whisper of celebration. I took a sip. It was crisp and cold and tasted like victory. I pulled out my phone. I ignored the missed calls from unknown numbers that I knew were Terrence trying to beg from a different phone. I scrolled down to a contact saved as Sarah Foundation Director. I pressed call. Jasmine. Sarah's voice answered on the first ring. It is late. Is everything okay? Everything is perfect, Sarah, I said. I am leaving Atlanta now. I just wanted to confirm the transfer we discussed. The grant for the Youth Financial Literacy Program, she asked. Yes, I said. But I want to make a change. I want to double the amount. And I want to add a stipulation. I want to open a dedicated housing wing for young women who have been kicked out of their homes. I want fully furnished apartments. I want credit repair services. I want job training. I want to make sure no girl has to sleep in her car because her family failed her. There was a silence on the other line, and then I heard Sarah sniffle. Jasmine, that is. That is incredible. That will save so many lives. Do it, I said. Start tomorrow. I hung up the phone. I leaned back against the headrest, watching the rain streak against the window. The car began to move, gliding down the driveway, past the manicured lawn, past the gates that used to intimidate me. I looked out the window. The glass was dark-tinted for privacy, but for a moment as we passed under a street lamp, I caught my own reflection. I did not see the scared little girl who used to hide in the kitchen. I did not see the sister who was bullied for being poor. I saw a woman who was calm. I saw a woman who was powerful. I saw a woman who had walked through the fire and come out made of gold. The car turned onto the main road, accelerating smoothly into the night, leaving the house and the past in the rearview mirror where they belonged. 6 months is a long time. In the world of finance, it is 2 fiscal quarters. In the world of real estate, it is enough time for a foreclosure to be finalized and a mansion to be sold to a developer who tore it down for parts. But in the real world, the world I live in now, 6 months is enough time to heal. I drove past the apartment complex in East Point yesterday. I did not stop. I just watched from the tinted window of my car. I saw my father Otis walking to the bus stop. He was wearing a new coat, one he bought with his own money from the allowance I send him. He walked with his head up. He looked lighter. He looked like a man who had finally put down a heavy weight he had been carrying for 30 years. I saw Viola too. She was sitting on the small balcony of Unit 2B hanging laundry on a drying rack. She was not wearing designer silk. She was wearing a simple cotton dress. She looked older, stripped of her expensive armor, but she also looked real. She was living the life she could afford, and in a strange way, it suited her better than the lies ever did. She had no audience there, no one to impress, just the quiet reality of her consequences. Across town, the rain was hammering against the windshield of a beat-up delivery scooter. My brother Terrence was working his Saturday shift. I get the notifications on my phone every week, the automated deposit from the payroll company. Terrence works for a food delivery app now. He spends 12 hours a day dodging traffic, running upstairs, carrying greasy bags of fast food to people who have more money than him. Every Friday his paycheck is processed. And every Friday 50% of it disappears, instantly routed directly into my account to pay off his debt. He is tired. He is humbled. He is finally learning the value of $1 because he has to sweat for every single cent. He is not a mogul. He is not a crypto genius. He is a man working off a sentence he wrote for himself. But I was not in East Point, and I was not watching Terrence. I was standing on a stage in the heart of downtown Atlanta. The sun was shining through the massive glass atrium of the new building. A crowd of 300 people stood before me. There were news cameras flashing. There were city officials clapping. But mostly there were kids. I looked at the front row. There were 50 teenagers sitting there wearing matching t-shirts that read the Brooks Tech Initiative. They were black and brown kids from neighborhoods just like the one I grew up in. They were kids who had been told they were not smart enough. Kids who had been told to lower their expectations. Kids who had to study by the light of a street lamp because the power was cut off at home. I stepped up to the microphone. The giant red ribbon fluttered in the breeze behind me. I held the oversized ceremonial scissors in my hands. They felt heavy but good. When I was your age, I told the crowd, my voice echoing through the hall. I was told that I did not belong at the table. I was told that my dreams were too big for my bank account. I was told to sit in the kitchen while others ate. I looked at a young girl in the front row. She was about 16 with braids and glasses. She was holding a tablet like it was a treasure map. She looked exactly like I did 10 years ago, scared but hungry. But today I continued smiling at her. I am building a new table. This center is not just a building. Oh, it is a promise. It is a promise that your brilliance will not be ignored. It is a promise that poverty will not be a prison for your mind. Here you will learn to code. You will learn to build. You will learn that you are the architects of the future. The crowd erupted in cheers. I turned and invited the girl with the braids to join me on stage. Her hands were shaking as she took the scissors. I placed my hands over hers, guiding her. Together we clamped down. The sharp blades sliced through the red satin. The ribbon fell. The doors opened. The Jasmine Brooks Center for Innovation was officially open. As the kids rushed in, eager to touch the new computers and start their new lives, I stepped back. I walked to the edge of the stage away from the cameras. I looked out through the glass wall at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, my family was living the small, contained lives they had earned. They were safe, but they were no longer my center of gravity. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and possibilities. I did not feel the old ache in my chest. I did not feel the need to call my mother and ask if she was proud of me. I did not need to show Terrence my bank balance to feel worthy. I did not need their permission to exist anymore. I looked at the reflection in the glass. I saw a woman who was whole. I saw a woman who was free. I smiled a genuine smile that reached my eyes. I turned away from the window and walked into the room full of future billionaires ready to get to work. The morning light in East Point did not filter through custom silk draperies. It sliced through the cracked plastic blinds of Unit 2B, casting harsh striped shadows across the laminate floor that was peeling at the corners. Viola sat at the small, wobbly kitchen table staring at a chipped mug of instant coffee. She was wearing her silk dressing gown, the one with the ostrich feathers on the cuffs, but here in this cramped kitchenette with the hum of the refrigerator and the smell of the neighbors frying bacon through the vent, she looked like a costume from a play that had closed months ago. She had not unpacked the boxes. They were stacked against the wall, a cardboard barricade she refused to dismantle. In her mind, unpacking meant accepting. Unpacking meant this was home. So she lived out of a suitcase, digging through layers of cashmere to find a clean pair of socks, refusing to put her crystal figurines on the cheap particle board shelves. She jumped when a siren wailed past the window, followed by the heavy bass of a car stereo rattling the window pane. She pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to massage away the migraine that had started the day she signed the lease. Otis walked into the room. He did not look miserable. That was the thing that infuriated Viola the most. Her husband, the man she had dragged through high society by his collar, looked content. He was wearing a simple pair of work pants and a flannel shirt he had bought at the thrift store down the street. He was humming. He poured himself a cup of the cheap coffee and leaned against the counter, looking out the window at the parking lot. "I am going down to the park," Otis announced. "The guys are playing dominoes today. Mr. Henderson said he would teach me how to play spades." Viola looked at him with disdain. "Dominoes," she scoffed. "With those people. Otis, you are a Brooks. We do not play dominoes in the park with retirees who drink beer in the middle of the day. We play bridge. We play golf. You should be networking. You should be finding a way to get us out of here." Otis turned to look at her. His eyes were clear. For the first time in decades, he was not medicating his stress with expensive scotch. He was sober and he was calm. "I am a Brooks who lives in apartment 2B, Viola," he said simply. "And those people are our neighbors. They are good people. They helped me carry the groceries up the stairs yesterday while you were inside crying over a broken fingernail." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the white envelope Jasmine sent every month. He took out a $20 bill. "I am going to buy some ribs," he said. "We are going to grill out back with the neighbors tonight. You should come down. The fresh air would do you good." "I will do no such thing," Viola snapped, drawing her robe tighter around her. "I will not be seen socializing in a parking lot. What if someone sees me? What if the Wilsons drive by?" "The Wilsons are not driving by East Point," Viola Otis said, his voice holding a new edge of authority. "They never cared about you. They cared about your pool and your wine cellar. They have not called you once since the house was sold." Viola flinched. It was the truth, and it stung more than the cheap coffee. Her phone sat silent on the table, no invites to galas, no brunch dates. She had been erased from her old life as efficiently as a stain on a white carpet. Otis put on his coat. He looked at the woman he had feared for so long. He saw her vanity, he saw her refusal to adapt, and he finally saw that her prison was not this apartment. Her prison was her own mind. "I left the grocery money on the counter," he said, pointing to a small stack of bills. "Do not spend it on magazines or face creams, Viola. That has to last us until Tuesday, and do not think about sending it to Terrence." I checked the account. Jasmine was serious. "If that balance drops because of him, she cuts us off. I will not be homeless because you cannot say no to your son." He opened the door. The sounds of the street rushed in, loud and chaotic. "I will be back for dinner," he said. He closed the door, leaving her alone in the silence of the apartment. Viola looked at the money on the counter. She looked at the boxes she refused to unpack. She looked at the phone that never rang. She realized with a terrifying clarity that she was the only one still fighting a war that had ended 6 months ago. Otis had found peace in the poverty, but she was sitting in a one-bedroom apartment wearing silk feathers waiting for an audience that was never coming back. The rain-slicked alley behind the taco shop smelled like garbage and old fryer oil. Terrence struggled to unstrap the delivery box from his scooter, his fingers numb from the cold. He was 12 hours into his shift and his back screamed in protest. He just wanted to drop off this order and go sleep on his mattress on the floor. But when he turned around, he froze. 2 men were blocking the exit. They were not customers. They wore heavy coats and expressions of bored violence. Terrence recognized them instantly. They were collectors for the private lender he had used to try and win back the mortgage money when the crypto crashed. "Please," Terrence stammered, backing up until he hit a dumpster. "I am good for it. You know I am good for it. My sister is Jasmine Brooks. She is worth $500 million. I can get the money from her. I just need a few more days to work on her." The taller man laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound that echoed off the brick walls. "We saw the news, Terrence. Your sister cut you off. You are nobody now. She is not paying your gambling debts." He stepped closer, grabbing Terrence by the collar of his bright orange delivery uniform. "You owe us 50 grand plus the VIG." The man growled, his face inches from Terrence. "The interest is ticking every hour. If you do not have a payment by Friday, we are going to break your legs. And if you run, we will find you. Consider this a courtesy call." He shoved Terrence hard. Terrence fell backward, landing in a puddle of dirty water. The delivery bag burst open, spilling tacos into the mud. He lay there shaking in the trash, sobbing, as the men walked away, realizing that his last name could no longer save him. I ran into Ashley on a Tuesday afternoon in the organic aisle of a grocery store in Buckhead. I was picking out a bottle of olive oil for a dinner party, and my security detail was waiting discreetly at the end of the row. I reached for a bottle and my hand almost brushed against another woman. I looked up to apologize and the words died in my throat. It was Ashley. But it was not the Ashley who used to mock my clothes at Christmas dinner. This Ashley looked exhausted. Her expensive highlights had grown out, leaving dark roots, and she was wearing a coat that had seen better days. She was not wearing her wedding ring. She froze when she saw me. Her eyes widened in panic. She gripped the handle of her cart so tight her knuckles turned white. I looked down at her cart. It was not full of champagne and steak. It was full of generic cereal and bulk pasta. She waited for me to say something cruel. She waited for me to laugh at her downfall. But I felt nothing. The hate was gone, leaving only a distant pity. "Hello, Ashley," I said softly. She blinked, tears welling in her eyes. She did not ask for money. She did not make an excuse. She just nodded her head in a quick, ashamed motion and hurried her cart down the aisle away from me. I watched her disappear behind a display of apples, realizing that for her the party was truly over. Sunday morning was supposed to be Viola's sanctuary. She had spent 2 hours steaming her last good suit and polishing her shoes until the scuffs from the East Point pavement were hidden. She walked into the First Baptist foyer with her head held high, smiling her practiced smile, ready to take her usual place in the front pew. But as she approached Mrs. Wilson and the deacon wives, the circle of women tightened. It was a subtle movement, a closing of ranks that physically shut her out. Viola faltered, but kept her smile fixed. "Good morning, ladies," she chimed in, her voice trembling slightly. "Isn't the choir magnificent today?" Mrs. Wilson turned slowly. She looked Viola up and down, her eyes lingering on the outdated handbag. "Oh, hello, Viola," she said, her voice dripping with that poisonous southern sweetness. "We were just surprised to see you. We heard you had moved quite far away." The other women exchanged knowing glances. There was no invitation to brunch. There was no offer to sit together. Just a wall of silk and judgment. "We are praying for your situation," dear Mrs. Wilson added, turning her back. The message was clear. You are poor now. You are not one of us. Viola stood alone in the crowded hall, clutching her purse, realizing that God might forgive sins, but the ladies of Buckhead never forgave poverty. I met Julian on the roof of the new tech center while we were reviewing the solar panel installation. He was the lead architect on the project and the only man in Atlanta who had the nerve to tell me I was wrong about the structural glass. I liked him immediately. He did not look at me like a bank account to be drained. He looked at me like an equal to be respected. He had paint on his boots and a pencil tucked behind his ear, and he did not care that I was wearing a $5,000 coat. We were standing by the railing looking out at the city lights when he handed me a paper cup of lukewarm coffee from the bodega down the street. It was not champagne. It was not fancy. But it was the most romantic gesture I had experienced in years, because he had remembered exactly how I take it black with 2 sugars. He asked me about my day, not my net worth. He asked me what I was reading, not what I was buying. When he reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, his hand was steady and warm. For the first time, I did not flinch. I did not wonder what he wanted from me, because I knew the only thing he wanted was to know me. I looked at him and realized with a start that this was what love was supposed to feel like. It was not a transaction. It was a partnership. I am sitting on the balcony of my penthouse looking out at the Atlanta skyline. The city lights are twinkling like a sea of diamonds below me. It is quiet up here. For a long time, I was afraid of the quiet. I thought silence meant loneliness. I thought if the phone was not ringing, if there was not a crisis to solve or a check to write, then I did not matter. But I was wrong. This silence is not empty. It is full. It is full of peace. It is full of the absence of drama. It is the sound of a life that finally belongs to me. I know what they say about me back in East Point. I know Viola tells anyone who will listen that I am a cold-hearted witch who abandoned her family. I know Terrence curses my name every time he has to climb a flight of stairs with a delivery bag. And I am okay with that. I have made peace with being the villain in their version of the story, because playing the villain for them allowed me to finally be the hero for myself. I spent 27 years trying to buy their love, trying to earn a seat at a table where I was only ever served scraps. I thought if I just gave enough, if I just achieved enough, they would finally see me. But you cannot make people see you when they are blinded by their own greed. You cannot save people who are determined to drown. I look back through the glass doors. Inside the apartment, Julian is sleeping. He does not care about my bank account. He does not care about my last name. He cares about me. That is a wealth I never knew existed. I realize that family is not about blood. Blood is just biology. Family is about respect. Family is about safety. Family are the people who clap for you when you win, not the ones who try to steal the trophy. I stand up and lean against the railing. The wind is cool on my face. The storm is over. The house is gone. The debt is settled. I am not the daughter of Otis and Viola anymore. I am not the sister of Terrence. I am just Jasmine. And for the first time in my life, that is enough. The past is a lesson, but the future is mine. And it looks beautiful. This story powerfully illustrates that shared DNA does not guarantee loyalty, love, or respect. For years, Jasmine sought validation from a family that offered only neglect, proving that you cannot save people who are determined to drown. The most profound lesson here is that true family is defined by behavior, not blood. Setting boundaries with toxic relatives is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of survival. You must stop seeking approval from those committed to misunderstanding you. Ultimately, being the villain in their distorted narrative is a necessary price to pay for becoming the hero of your own life. If you are ready to stop setting yourself on fire to keep others warm and finally build the life you truly deserve, hit that subscribe button and share this story with someone who needs the courage to choose themselves today.